Hi everyone, I'd like to welcome you to another table talk. Today I'm going to just discuss with you how I like to finish my planes, sand them, paint them, that sort of thing. Um, Sanding the plane, it's not necessarily a necessity by any means, but I can tell you from experience that taking the time to sand the plane, smooth it down, especially around any of the square edges, just makes a big difference in how smooth the plane flies and how efficient it feels in the air. So even if you're not going for blinding speed, it just the efficiency of how it passes through the air is much better. I did some experimentation actually a few years ago when I was still sort of playing around with the RC Speedo app that I had on my phone, and I probably gained about 5-6 miles an hour top speed going from a non-sanded plane to a sanded plane. So it does make a difference, and I think it makes the plane look a little nicer too. But anyway, I take the time. It's a bit fussy and it's a bit messy, but I like to take the time to sand my planes just because I find they just fly better and feel better in the air, a lot more slippery, as it were. So anyway, the places that I do tend to sand, the nose, the canopy here, like to have that nice and smooth, so that as the air is flowing over the plane, I'm not starting with a lot of turbulence here at the nose and leading edge and all that sort of stuff. I do I don't have a motor in this plane right now. This is my quad racing motor test bed, so it's waiting patiently for its next quad racing motor. But anyway, I tend to sand all of these all of these edges. Obviously the the leading edge of the wing, with the KF4s on it. I like to use, I know there's arguments that you should use a rounded leading edge. I've always used just sort of this sharp leading edge. Just seems to work best for me. So again, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I'll also taper my trailing edges, leading and trailing edges of these surfaces, like the vertical stabilizers, rudders, elevons, horizontal stabilizers, trailing edge of the wing, and then same thing in the prop slot. I will do a tapered edge on the back and the front of the prop slot. If you do not sand, if you put KF4s on your plane or KFs of any kind, do not sand the trailing edge of the KF, because you're defeating the purpose by doing that. So yeah, so just generally, a good overall sanding. Now, for planes like this, you sort of have to make your life easier. I actually sanded this plane at 2 different times in the build process. You have to look at sort of how your plane goes together. This one, you essentially build up the fuselage, so the fuselage and the canopy are already essentially a tube that are just waiting to be mated to the wing plate. So what I tend to like to do is I will, like all these leading and trailing edges here on these vertical stabilizers and the wing plate, other than the KFs, because those don't get put on until later in the build, I will do that sanding when it's a flat surface. It's just a lot easier. I just actually put an old scrap of plywood sort of in my lap, and I just sand it that way. It's a lot easier to do that on the wing plate after you've, if you're using ailerons, for example, making sure that you've already put the ailerons in there so that you've got a nice straight trailing edge on your wing, for example. And then with this one I can sand the whole canopy, fuselage, especially the nose area before it gets mated together. And then I sand it again once I put the KFs on. I will sand, the leading edge of the wing, and then I also tend to sand, just down here, just to sort of round off these edges, make them nice and smooth. The other thing it does is it also reduces, on average, a good sanding job on a plane of this size. It probably reduces the weight by maybe 10 grams, 10 to 15 grams, depending on how big a plane you're building. So what I like to do is before I start sanding, is I'll use a knife similar to this, and along, if there's especially on the score lines, if you got really really big gaps there, is I'll use this knife, like for example, and just very, very gently, you want a brand new super sharp blade, and I'll just sort of shave off just a tiny little bit, just to save me some sanding. And I do that. I don't do that on these, but I will do that on these bottom pieces. Oops, these bottom pieces here, the nacelles and stuff. I'll just sort of shave those edges off. And again, you want a oops, I almost cut myself there. Stupid. You want a super sharp, brand new blade. This actual knife body, I think I got from Hobby King years ago. I buy these blades from the buck store. I think they cost me about 12 cents or 15 cents a blade. I get them in packs of 10, and those work really, really well for that. Okay, so once I get that sanded or trimmed down, and again, you don't want to take off it when in doubt. When you're using this knife, whoops, if you are going to use this knife, is take off less than you think you need to, because you can always fix it with sandpaper. If you take too much off with the knife, then you know, you're going to end up with gouges in your plane, or you're going to end up with, you know, bleeding edges or something of your wing looking a little wonky. So always just you know, you can do the whole thing by sanding, but I just like to use this knife because it saves me a little time. And then what I'll do is I use a couple of different types of sandpaper. I primarily use, this is 150 grit. I primarily use 150 grit. Occasionally I will finish off if I want a really super smooth finish, or you know, I've got want to sand out some lines that I put in with this rougher sandpaper. I'll use 220 grit. And that seems to work out really well for me. Pardon me. Now what I will say is I always wear something, you know, I just get these. This is just like a cheap fabric mask I get from the dollar store. I think I got a couple of them for, I don't know, $1.50 or something like that. You don't want to breathe in the dust from this foam, because it's, you know, it's just not good for you. The other thing is too, is that when you're sanding it, you're also sanding some of the glue. The dried glue probably, so you don't want to breathe in any of that. So when I can, I'll actually do it outside, and I always, even if I do it outside, I'll wear one of these masks just so that I'm not breathing this stuff in. You know, it's a bit of a pain, and it's you know, it's uncomfortable, and my glasses often tend to fog up. But you know, rather than sucking in that dust, it's a heck of a lot better. Now, if I really am wanting to go super smooth, like I did on this nose, what I'll do is on this fuselage and nose, is I'll give it an initial sanding just to get the grooves, like especially the score and fold grooves here, just to get them down sort of as small as possible. And then what I'll do is I'll use, this is a DAP Fast and Final. It's a super lightweight spackle. You know, for putting in drywall and stuff like that in the house. So I just buy these in a small container, and a tip that I would pass on to you is this lid just snaps on and snaps off, but it's not always super airtight. So what I do is I just put this is just, you know, some saran wrap or cling film or paper or plastic, and I just put that on there and then snap the lid on. It keeps it from drying out. I just picked this up at the hardware store. So what I'll do is on those grooves that are left, those little grooves that are left, is I'll just take you know, little bits of it at a time. I just use a little piece of scrap foam, and then I just sort of smooth it down into those grooves. I like to let it set up. I'll do that, you know, and then I like to let it set up at least overnight. You know, 8 to 10 hours. It dries a lot faster than that, but because you're filling those little grooves, I find it just, you know, I want it to be really super cured, and it doesn't always necessarily stick to the foam all that well. So if you go back and sand it before it's fully hardened, it'll come out on you. So, and again, be very, very you know, economical with the use of this. It really, if you're careful with it, it adds next to no weight, maybe a couple of grams, but it'll really make your plane look smooth. Now I only use it on the like on the canopy here, and the nose, and you know, maybe down underneath here. So I'm not using a whole lot. Everywhere else, I'm just essentially smoothing it by sanding it. So again, just a tip that I use, makes the plane look nice, and it really gives it a nice smooth. And if you've, maybe on the initial sanding, if you've, put some grooves in it, I mean, that's one thing you have to be very, very careful with when you're sanding foam, especially the softer stuff, is use a very, very gentle touch. If you haven't sanded foam before, you might want to take some scrap and just sort of practice with it, just to sort of get the pressure and see how much comes off. The softer foams, like this Adams Ready Board or Dollar Tree foam or model plane foam, those sand away really quickly. So if you're sitting there watching the hockey game or the football match or whatever, and you're sanding away, and next thing you know, you could sand a hole in your plane. So just use very, very gentle pressure until you sort of get the feel for how much foam is coming off when you're sanding it. Okay, so that's generally the sanding, and then when I'm done, when I finish the sanding, after every step of sanding, I know some guys will actually wash their planes. I don't do that, especially since I started using Dollar Tree foam, because if I put that in water, the paper's going to come off. So actually all I do is I just take the vacuum, and you have that sort of like the little brush attachment on the end of it, is I'll just take the vacuum and I'll just gently vacuum all the dust and stuff, all the residue off of the plane after that, so that you're not, it's not constantly falling off, or you're going to breathe it in, or it's, falling all over your clothes or your house. So I'll do that, and it just, helps keep the mess down. Okay, so once it's all sanded, and and it's ready for paint, like I said, I'll just clean it up with the vacuum cleaner. Now I use several different. I use acrylic craft paint, but I just sort of pick up whatever is the least expensive. Primarily, I buy most of it from the dollar store or Walmart or craft stores. Some of the stuff that they carry at craft stores, like this is Craft Smart, I think, from Michaels. It's a little bit better quality. They tend to have a bit more concentration of pigment in them. But quite frankly, for most planes, I pick up bottles of this acrylic craft paint at the buck store for $1 and a quarter. Really inexpensive, and I'm just brushing it on. So what I normally do is I will take I use these little cups. What I was doing with these cups, these are biodegradable. They're just made out of paper. I used to use these cups all the time, and then I'm just throwing them all away, and I'm tossing like 4 or 5 of them in the garbage when I painted a plane. The other option, I guess, is to wash them, which maybe is probably the most eco-friendly. Or I just use these little paper cups. I get these paper cups from the buck store. I just stick it in there. What I found happening with the paper cups, if I just used it without this, is that sometimes they leak, and then you get paint all everywhere. So I just put them in this plastic cup in case they leak. Now what I do with the paint is, the paint tends to have be fairly it doesn't have a lot of consistency between brands, or depending on how long you've had it laying around on its viscosity. Like sometimes you'll get stuff that's like really thick. It comes out of the bottle like the consistency of pudding, and then other times it's thinner. So what I do is I'll squirt as much as I think I need into the little cup there, and then what I like to do is I get this at the dollar store. It's a 50-50 mix of alcohol and water, just rubbing alcohol essentially. You could use just straight water, I suppose, too, if you want, but I found with just using straight water that the paint takes a lot longer to dry than it does if you use the alcohol, because the alcohol will evaporate off a lot faster as the paint is drying. I suppose you could all use just straight alcohol as well if you want. Depending on what foam you're using, obviously test this on a piece of scrap foam. I mean, it's highly doubtful that the alcohol will react with it, but you never know. So anyway, yeah. So what I do is I'll add a few drops at a time, stir it up, and kind of what I'm looking for is the consistency of coffee cream. Like not too thin, not too thick. The reason that I do that is that if you just glop the paint on straight out of the bottle is what I found when I was a card-carrying member of Overbuilders Anonymous, was that I tended to use my paint jobs would end up adding like, you know, an ounce or more to my planes. I mean, it was just getting ridiculous. So that's why now I thin it down, you know, and I just stir it up with a bamboo skewer or whatever, and till it gets to that sort of that consistency of coffee cream or you know, around there. You just don't want it too thick, and then depending on where you're putting it on, you don't want it too thin either, because you don't want the paint to run. But again, that might just take a little practice. You know, use some scrap foam and find out sort of what viscosity works for you. I just use again, I just brush it on. I just use you know, I've got a couple of pretty decent brushes that I picked up on sale at Michael's craft store. So, you know, if you keep an eye out for acrylic brushes, and I've also picked up some pretty decent ones actually from the dollar store. So these work really well, and then of course they just wash, they just clean up with warm. I just run them under sort of hot tap water, and then you know, make sure that all the residue, the old paint residues out of them. So the other thing you can do, and I actually use, you know, like if you're just wanting to keep it super light, or for example, if you've seen my my latest SU-30 version 4 that I've sort of built as a winter beater plane, I've actually just colored that with magic marker. The magic marker adds absolutely zero weight, and you know, you can add some really decent color to your plane so that you can keep track of it. And I actually use, and again, I just buy these at the dollar store. What I will say is that compared to more expensive markers like Sharpie or whatever, some of these are smell pretty darn strong. So when you use them, you know, make sure you are in a well ventilated area, or you know, by the time you come down from your marker fume high, you might find out that you've done a paint scheme on your plane different than what you wanted. But I actually use on my planes on the bottom here, I find that this really helps on these nacelles. I just use black magic marker on that, and on the bottom of these nozzles here. You know, you can see it's starting to fade a little bit here just from scraping along the ground. So the nice thing is then you can just, you know, real quick, two seconds or less, touch that up if it's getting too faded. But I've done lots of planes, you know, the entire paint job, if you want, just with a magic marker, you know, boom, done, and you've got a plane that's got color on it in less than an hour. And then, you know, if it starts to fade over time, you can just do a quick touch up with a marker. And funnily enough, the planes that I've used magic marker on, they you know, there's magic there. They just seem to fly great. You know, I've had planes, 2 planes I did magic marker paint jobs on that I got over 300 flights on. They just flew great. They didn't, you know, they never quit. They were just happy as can be. So anyway, like I said, if you're not terribly worried about a real fancy or scale-looking paint job, you can do a quick paint job just with magic marker, and then it's you know, bing bang boom to touch up and keep the color there. So okay, so how do I pick my my paint schemes? Well, obviously not, you know, a lot of my paint schemes are not what you would consider you know, a scale or representing a scale paint scheme. Excuse me. And I know this sounds like a bit of an oxymoron to have a visible camouflage, but I tend to, you know, I tend to find that it's just really easy for me to do these sort of 2 and 3 color camo paint schemes. And the main reason being is that, you know, you've got some good contrast here, like, you know, black and white, gray. And for me, you know, when the plane is several hundred feet away in just about any sky condition, it helps me see it. I don't tend to paint the bottoms. You know, I leave the bottoms white, mostly just to save weight. I'll probably put a little bit of paint along the sides of these nacelles here. That's where I might really water the paint down quite a bit, you know, just because I don't want to add any weight there. That, you know, just personal technique. So again, I just find you know, these camo style paint jobs, You know, if you've seen my F-22, I painted that sort of red, white, and blue because it represents the colors of the United States. And I painted Russian planes in the same sort of thing because the Russian flag is blue, white, and red. You know, you can just use your kind of your own imagination. You know, and again, you might do some tests on some scrap foam to sort of see. You want to pick colors. For me, even though it's a camouflage, I like to have colors that will contrast. So for me, you know, this Arctic paint scheme, I've used this on a couple of different planes. This one works really, really well in most conditions. You know, a combination of blues and whites, or the red, white, and blue, that tends to work really well for me. Or like on my F-18, I've got red and like a red and a bright yellow kind of thing. So you know, depending on how what sort of colors show up well for your eyes. And what I do is, like for the MiG, the MiG and the Sukhois, I'll link down below. I found a great website by a fellow in Poland, and he keeps really up-to-date paint schemes for the MiG-29 family and the Su-27 family, or Su-30 family of Russian fighters. But you know, they're your planes. You paint them whatever way you want. I mean, I don't worry too much about the scale police. You know, I just do it the way that you know, I'll see a paint scheme and go, oh, that looks pretty cool, and you know, I'll pick whatever colors that I want. I mean, it's your plane. You paint it the way that you want. So that's what I use, and then I just put these little these decals or decals, depending on where you live and how you pronounce it. These are actually just made out of paper. So what I do is I'll share some links again down below. There's a couple of places on Wikipedia where you can get all the roundels and fin flashes for most of the nations around the world, depending on what you want. And what I do is I just copy those into Word document, text document, whatever, anything that you can just arrange it on a piece of paper, size it sort of the size you want, and then I just print it off on my printer at home in paper, cut it out, with a nice sharp X-Acto knife, and then I just glue them on. And you see that they do fade. Unfortunately, they do fade when they get wet. But the nice thing is you can just kind of print another sheet off, and then glue it over top. But what I found is that depending on what kind of glue you use, I use the same glue that I use to build my planes because it seems to hold them on. But if I pull them off, it'll pull a bunch of paint, pull some paint off as well. So if you're really worried about that, just print another set off and then just glue another one on top. So like I said, I'll have links for some of the different things. And the other thing is, you can just type in Google F-22 paint scheme. There's some really cool ones in a lot of video games that people have done that look pretty cool. It's your plane, your imagination. You paint it whatever way you want. So hopefully that's been helpful to you. Like I said, it's not absolutely necessary. I'm looking to optimize as much power out of my power systems and have as much efficiency as possible with my planes, and I just find that having a good sanding job helps to keep my planes light and slippery through the air. And then again with the paint scheme, pick whatever you want. Like these one of the reasons these camos are so easy is that I will sort of follow a paint thing, but then if I get into trouble, I can just kind of free form. And I start with always start with the lightest color first, so white in this case, and then gray, and then black, so that if you have to overlap it or sort of fix a problem where you've messed up a little bit with a lighter color previously, you can just sort of paint over that little area and it'll mask it. So dead simple that way. Again, hope that's been helpful. I won't link a lot of this stuff because you can buy, sandpaper, paint, brushes, all that sort of stuff. I'm sure you can buy locally, so there's no point in putting any links there. But I will link the sites that I use for inspiration for paint schemes on my planes, and the fin flashes and the aircraft insignia. I'll link those down below. So thanks very much for watching, folks. Blue skies, calm winds to everyone. Park jet noise, the other sound of freedom, baby. Take care.